Welcome to or back to the podcast. My name is Thomas Reed, and I'm the host and producer of Read My Mind Radio. The podcast bringing you compelling people impacted by all degrees of blindness and disability. Sometimes I share experiences of my own as a man adjusting to becoming blind as an adult. Today, well, it's right there in the title. That is the place we have to start if we really are going to be about making change. I'm talking about individuals, society, and yes, blindness and disability organizations too. If you're part of the Read My Mind Radio family, you know I'm pretty optimistic. It takes a lot of effort right now, but I'm trying, y'all. Trying to remain hopeful.
The outrage over the death of George Floyd is global. In London, tens of thousands amassed despite the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. It was a similar situation in Melbourne, calling for an end to police brutality and institutional racism. Germany passed a law forbidding public authorities from discriminating against anyone based on their gender, race, sexual orientation, and more. Protesters also gathered in central Tokyo, and in neighbouring South Korea, dozens of people took part in a march through the capital.
흑인의 목숨 소중하다. It means black lives are precious. Black lives are worth protecting.
That solidarity and declaration that I'm hearing from around the world feels good. But I need to hear it from voices much closer to home.
Black Lives Matter.
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 Let's go.
Yo, Black Lives Matter.
Send. Button.
Read
My mind.
Read
My mind.
Girls, lemonade. You know, dish sound. Rihanna, pass me a napkin, please.
Yeah, you didn't even give me water.
Your mother said she got water. Like a lot of families, meals are a time to come together, not only to prepare and enjoy the food, but also to check in with one another. In the Reed household, we established some rules years ago around what was acceptable during meals. Like, we don't answer phone calls. We don't look at our devices, but rather we stay in the moment while we're eating together.
Good evening. Soaring, emotional, and sometimes tinged with anger. But at its core, the funeral here today for George Floyd was about celebrating a life that will now forever symbolize the fight for equal justice.
Unfortunately, no matter how much I would like the rule to be in effect, just while we're eating, there are times when we can't really afford to keep them. The most recent murders of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, the protests, and of course the self-described nationalists in the White House have caused us to rescind the rules. Both of my kids need to discuss all of this. Rihanna, who will be 23 soon, is extremely passionate when it comes to issues around social justice. She needs to be active, and she's figuring out the best ways for her to do that. For example, donating to protest bail funds, continuing to educate herself through reading, and sharing resources with her network. Raven is younger, more internal, and is really figuring out how to articulate her thoughts around this subject. Her friend groups are very diverse, and she recognizes the differences and really appreciates them. Recently, she had to deal with the outing of a classmate, one that's garnered a lot of national attention. This young 17-year-old made very public, awful racist comments. Listen to the statement from a young girl from Generation Z. Some thought this would be the post-racial generation free from racism. Notice how deliberately she shares her quote-unquote revelation. If you're triggered by little racists using the N-word, skip ahead about 34 seconds.
So, I've been seeing this video going around about why brown people should be able to say the N-word. So I'm here to tell you why white people should be able to say the N-word. Because we made it up. And none of you guys would be able to say that word if my ancestors didn't decide to call you black people niggers all the way back in those old days. And so what do you guys do to try and show your appreciation for coming up with your best word to call your best friend nigga as you pass each other in the hall? You do what all good black people do. You stole it. So all I'm doing here is just trying to take back what's already ours.
If it was shocking to you because you never heard this sort of language, it's time to acknowledge your privilege. It's not a time to pat yourself on the back because you raised your children to be colorblind. It's not a time to feel the need to share how you cried when Dr. King was assassinated or that you know someone who is black. That doesn't work toward a solution which makes you part of the problem. Not even the four walls of our comfortable home can keep my family protected from the reality of violence against black men, women, and children. Like trying to explain to my kids how Trayvon Martin's murderer was not going to face prison. Michael Brown's killer would just walk free. Rihanna has goals of moving out on her own. Meanwhile, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency technician, gets shot 8 times in her own home by police after wrongfully busting into her home in search of a suspect already in custody.
Black Lives Matter.
Raven right now is learning to drive. And I have to think of Sandra Bland and the others who ultimately had fatal encounters with police because they were driving while black. A word of caution. What you're about to hear is an example of the trauma and fear associated with police brutality. If the threat of violence is triggering, please skip ahead about 2 minutes.
Okay, relax, baby. Relax. Relax, because they will shoot you. They killed my boyfriend in 2015. Yes, he was killed by the police. You're going to shoot me too, right? For filming, right? We live. Look at that big-ass gun she got on this man with no weapon. Is all that really necessary, ma'am? I'm sorry. I just need to know. Is all the guns drawn on him necessary? Excuse me, Mr. Officer. My name is Sky Hosey. My boyfriend's name was Leroy Browning, and he was killed December 15th at a Taco Bell. This is crazy to me. Look, my car is right there. I was getting gas. I don't understand why y'all got guns drawn on him right now. Are y'all about to kill this man? Like, look at these big-ass guns they got on this man right now. Look at this baby. Look at this baby.
Stand up and walk slowly to the sound of my voice. Do it now.
Can y'all just put y'all guns away and somebody get them?
Sound of my voice.
My name is William, not suspect.
Don't move. Don't move. Please don't move. Can somebody just come get him? Can somebody put your guns down and get him, please? Don't resist him, okay?
Black Lives Matter.
Y'all know this isn't about my privileged dinner time, right? For black people, it's not only the threat of violence and interactions with police, but not dealing with the feelings around these murders is like allowing a virus to affect our bodies. We can wash our hands regularly, sanitize every package that comes into our homes, eat organic food, but how do we protect ourselves from feeling as though we don't matter? Being totally blind doesn't stop the images of these horrible killings from being ingrained in my mind. I don't need to see video of Michael Brown's body left on the street after being murdered. I don't need to see Ahmaud Arbery being shot down, or this deranged so-called officer kneeling on George Floyd's neck to understand what that looks like. In fact, these images involuntarily flash in my mind without ever having seen them. Recently, I tweeted that I was waiting to hear a show of solidarity from the blindness organizations. I soon read one from NFB and then specifically questioned if ACB was going to show their support. They did release a statement. They also directed a tweet to me explaining that they were waiting on a review before posting. My response? I was happy to see them done, but the real statement will be seen in their actions, like representation on boards and leadership positions and outreach. Both statements were weak. In general, any solidarity statement at this point in time that doesn't explicitly make it clear that Black Lives Matter just doesn't have much weight in my opinion. If a house was burning on a block of 10, should the fire department show equal attention to each house? Wouldn't it be fair to first put the one fire out, save the family in the house? Apparently, some would prefer that the fire department drive right past the burning house in order to make it clear that all the houses on the block are important. Meanwhile, do you all smell that smoke? The other homes on the block are beginning to burn.
Black Lives Matter.
If a solidarity statement had to be generated by the black or multicultural segment of the organization, is starting from the wrong place. Is that because some blind people like to think their blindness makes them immune to racism? Funny thing is, most blind people had sight at some point. In fact, most blind people aren't even totally blind. You're not being honest with yourself if you think racism doesn't affect you, as if you don't benefit from white supremacy.
Martin Luther King always talked about don't judge a man by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. And I gotta be honest with you, I think people like myself and other blind people are the best at that because we don't see the color of their skin.
Can blind people perceive race? Given that we identify a person's race primarily by their appearance, what elements do the visually impaired use to perceive race? Several studies have been done into this area, and the conclusion is definitively yes. Visually impaired people can perceive race.
History has shown that when it comes to so-called racial issues, America is all about weak statements. America doesn't want to examine their role. You know what? Let me say that again to not sugarcoat it. White America doesn't want to do the work to fix racial injustice. I see the same right now from blindness organizations. Asking black people to fix something we didn't create is just once again interrupting our family dinners. Why not start with a real self-evaluation? Have a conversation among the organization's leadership and board about race, from the personal to that relating to the organization. Look back. How many black people and others of color are even in the organization? How often does the leadership interact with them? And what have those interactions been about? How often do you invite black people and others of color to speak at your conferences? Have you ever truly done any outreach, or did you wait for those black people in the organization to recruit others? This is a problem that existed in this country for 400 years and won't be fixed with one statement. It won't be fixed in our lifetime. It requires a lot of work that starts with honest self-examination. It's past time for these organizations to truly look at the intersections between disability and other identities. Consider that the majority of police brutality cases impact black people with disabilities. The high rate of sexual violence against women with disabilities, the rights of LGBTQ and trans communities, which also consist of a significant population of people with disabilities, the violence against black transgender women who also need our support. Honestly, if you have a problem with that, then you need to ask yourself if you're really about justice for all or just you. All the organizations that are either of or for the blind seem to really want the same thing: independence, security, opportunity for all blind people. Who are they really including? For some, learning how to use a white cane, access technology, or some other blindness skills training isn't going to be enough to have an opportunity to reach that goal. For me personally, to believe these organizations and others are really about independence for all, I'm going to have to see them making some moves. That should come from those in power right now. The process of changing perceptions is a long and difficult one. Right now, I'll accept the first step on that journey when I hear it said, Black Lives Matter.
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 In producing this podcast, I'm always searching for the right mix of education, resource sharing, and entertainment, as I usually believe our stories have more to offer outside of just those adjusting to blindness.
Who y'all talking to?
I recall this travel story from the Read My Mind radio archives. Check it.
Check it out. Check it out.
Just this past Thursday, I was traveling to Mobile, Alabama. Yes, Mobile, Alabama. Why? Well, that's not really for this discussion. Let's just go revisit the day. Exiting the chauffeur-driven Suburban, I'm met by one of the Allentown Airport staff responsible for assisting travelers through the airport. I refer to them as the meet and greet staff. Normally, I have to get to the check-in counter in order to request them. But luck just had it. A very nice gentleman by the name of Tom was waiting by the curb, looking for someone who needed assistance. Smoothly clearing the check-in process and security, Tom informs me that my flight is delayed just as we reach my gate. It was close to 12 p.m. and my flight was originally scheduled to leave at 1 o'clock and arrive at Atlanta at 3 o'clock for a connecting flight to Mobile at 5:15. Okay, no worries. A departure at 2 is fine. I'll get to Atlanta by 4. Even though Atlanta's airport is pretty big, I still have time to make my flight. And I'd rather wait in the Allentown airport, which is way smaller and more comfortable. At 2 o'clock, I'm told we're now departing at 2:30. Now this is a potential problem. With a connecting flight at 5:15, there's a good chance I can miss my flight. I go over to the ticket agent to see what I can do about this dilemma. Rosita, the ticket agent, schedules me for the later flight that leaves Atlanta at 9:15 in the event that I miss my 5:15 flight. You see, requiring the assistance of a meet and greet, that means I'm one of the last people off the plane. This adds to the probability that I may miss my connection. On the flip side, I'm one of the first on the plane. I'm pretty relaxed already, but now I decide it's time for me to really go into a Zen state of mind. See, one thing about adjusting to blindness, it means that you have to become accustomed to waiting. The ticket agent announces over the PA that it's time to board. I grab my coat, my bag, and cane and proceed to the counter. I board with one of the ticket agents. I ask her if she could somehow call ahead and make sure that a meet and greet is there when we arrive so I can exit the plane quickly and make my connection. She takes my boarding pass and says she'll do that. Sitting in the window seat, I strike up a conversation with my seatmate when he arrives on board Delta Flight 5387. I tell him about my connection issue. He seems to think I have a strong chance of making the flight. We chat a little more. I put my headphones on and open my Audible app up and start reading my book. I'm good. I'm relaxed. I'm calm. I accept what I cannot control. At around a little after 4, the pilot announces that we're about to descend and we're scheduled to arrive on time, 4:40. My seatmate, he nudges me. I think you're going to make it, he says. Knowing what I know about the wait for a meet and greet, I say, we'll see. I'll still have to wait for assistance. At 4:45, we're on the ground, taxiing to the gateway. I take out my phone and check the Delta app to determine the status of my next flight. There's lots of rain and thunderstorms, so I'm hoping my next flight will be delayed. No. The pilot then announces we're going to Terminal C, Gate 33. By 5 p.m., we're still on the tour waiting to be directed into our new gate, D33. My seatmate, he's excitedly telling me that I can make my flight. Just run out of here. You can make it. I'm thinking, did he not hear me when I said I need to wait for assistance? I check the app again. It now says my next flight is boarding and scheduled to leave on time at gate D29. I tell my seatmate, oh, you can do it, he says, as he stands up to retrieve his bags from the overhead. I ask him to pass me my bag and my folded up cane. Is this yours too? He asks me. A folded white cane? I ask him. Yes. Now he sounds confused. I think it sinks in. My man, do you think you can help me get to D29? It has to be right near here. I didn't think it would be a bother. He wasn't connecting to another flight. Yeah, he exclaims. I tell him, okay, get in front of me and let me take your right elbow. He complies. I grab my bag and we take off. My seatmate now ripping through the narrow aisle and my shoulder and bag are knocking into chairs and walls. He apologizes. Bro, I could take a hit. Let's do it. Turn it up. Yeah, he grunts, now even more determined to accomplish his goal. We zoom past the flight attendants who say something about an assistant. I don't bother responding. There's no time for that. My seatmate and I, we're now a team, and we're on a mission. He's my blocker, I think to myself, and we're going to score this touchdown. Oh, we can do this, I hear him say as we rip past the ticket agent at gate D33. Now, quickly and purposefully walking, I hear my name.
Paging Mr. Reed, Thomas Reed.
That's me, I tell him. He's here, yells my blocker. He's here, says the ticket agent at D29 into her telephone. We get to the podium. Touchdown. As if rehearsed, we do a 2-hand high five, chest bump, all while the ticket agent and bystanders applaud. Okay, that would have been the movie version celebration. Instead, the ticket agent asks for my boarding pass. I retrieve it, thank my teammate, and I'm hurried on to my next flight. I never got his name or even have the chance to shake his hand. But man, I appreciate that guy. Now, sitting on my final flight to Alabama, I'm considering how through that entire process, I felt quite comfortable and calm, just going with the flow. I thought about the first part of that very well-known serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. This experience reinforced what I believe is the power of teamwork. I thought about how this pertains to lessons for those adjusting to blindness, or for that matter, adjusting to any sort of change. I've always been one to think of that very broad definition of independent as doing something by myself. Could I have done this by myself? Some may quickly say no. Others may argue, yeah, with the right circumstance, as in accessible information like a good indoor navigation app. But honestly, it was way more fun with a team. My seatmate, and ultimately my teammate for a few minutes at least, was, as far as I can tell, a white guy. We worked together. I was in a position where I needed him to be out in front if I wanted to make my flight. It wasn't my only option, but missing that flight would have meant a really long and possibly very uncomfortable delay. Not for him. Rather, just me. Shout out to everyone who shared their voice in this episode. I hope we can each continue to simply do that. Speak up when we hear something is wrong. Educate ourselves and our families. You don't have to engage with those who are out to do harm. But in those casual situations, call it out. I'm going to do the same on my end. Read My Mind Radio will be back on August 4th. I have some really good episodes planned for the second half of the year, but right now, I need to do a little recharging. If you're new to the podcast, feel free to check out the archive. We have over 100 episodes there, and they do not expire. You can get that just by subscribing to Read My Mind Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. None of my stuff is behind a paywall because I really do want it to be an accessible resource for those adjusting to blindness. Transcripts, resources, and more are over at readmymind.com. And yes, that's R to the E-I-D.
D, and that's me in the place to be.
Like my last name. Peace, and I mean that.